Welcome to Dr. David Eifrich's Health and Wealth Bulletin. This is Weekly Update. This week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the formation of the Prescription Interdiction and Litigation Task Force, which is charged with taking on the growing opioid epidemic in America. In fact, Jeff Sessions called this the deadliest drug crisis in American history. In fact, every day, about 91 Americans die from an opioid overdose. That's why today we want to talk about what opioids are, who is most at risk, and what you can do should you get an opioid prescription. So first we want to tackle what opioids are. These are synthetic painkillers that are designed to bind to our opioid receptors in our brains to help interrupt the pain pathway. They're about 1.5 times more powerful than morphine, and they include oxycodone, codeine, hydrocodone, and fentanyl. Popular brand names include OxyContin and Vicodin. Now, according to the U.S. Healthcare Cost and Utilization Project, in the past 20 years, there's been an increase of about 5-fold for the number of seniors admitted to the hospital for opioid-related problems. Seniors, in fact, are the largest population rise in hospital stays for opioid problems. They're the group most at risk now because they're getting more and more prescriptions for opioids. Part of the problem with seniors dealing with opioids is that they have a weaker immune system, along with altered hormones and a propensity to overdose because they may not be able to feel the effects as easily. This sets them up for an opioid addiction over time. Another problem with this, according to the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, is that folks 65 and older who are taking opioids for arthritis pain actually have an increased risk of fracture. And that brings us to our third point, which is the complications that seniors are more likely to face with opioids. The first of these is an increased risk of falling. That's because opioids interfere with the central nervous system, and if you're already unsteady on your feet, it can make you dizzy and lead to falls, which then lead to fractures. Opioids also contribute to confusion, constipation, and respiratory depression. Seniors are also at a higher risk for drug interactions. That's because they're on a higher number of prescription medications that can often lead to lethal side effects. In addition, seniors may have more trouble with memory, and because opioids rely on a take-as-needed basis, they're more likely to take too many pills in a 24-hour period. And finally, the detox effect for opioids in the system is actually slower for seniors. That means that it takes longer for the drugs to get through their system and for them to recover. And finally, our last point. Should you go to the doctor and they prescribe you an opioid, there are a few things to keep in mind. The first is to remember that usually opioids are now prescribed for short-term use. This is essential especially if you're recovering from surgery. But if they do prescribe an opioid for a longer-term use, there are 3 questions you need to ask your doctor. The first is to ask if there are any non-opioid medications or therapies that you can try. The second is to ask if the doctor has a contract for opioids. A contract in this case is a set of rules that you will need to follow while on your opioid medication. These can include things like an increased number of doctor visits to make sure that you're monitoring your medication correctly. And the third question is, can I see a pain specialist? Now, these are folks who are specially trained not only to help you manage pain, but also manage all of your medications. They can help lower the risk of any other complications. That's it for now. Keep sending your questions and comments to our feedback line. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.